has now contributed over $2.8 million to these centres and their work.
Question number 9, Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, does he agree with the Pure Advantage report released today that green growth represents a huge opportunity for all Kiwis to prosper? And if so, what will he do to put New Zealand on a green growth pathway?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, there are a number of aspects of the latest Pure Advantage report which the Government is interested in looking at because it may agree with them. The report underscores the importance of a significant number of existing government initiatives already underway, for example, the focus on energy efficiency, water reform and investment in research and development. These are all elements of the Government's business growth agenda, but I might also point out to the member that many New Zealand businesses are already on a green growth pathway because they invest large amounts of capital and considerable expertise week by week in changing their business in a way to make it more efficient or to deal with the environmental impact of their business. And we do not discredit them, we give them credit for that. This is not just owned by people sitting around in groups coming up with strategies.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree with the first line of the Pure Advantage report that, and I quote, the Earth's resources are finite? And if so, what does he think this means for economic policy?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what it means for economic policy is that we need to acknowledge scarcity. And that's why we have things like prices, and that's why the Greens advocated the emissions trading system as they did, which was, a system with the logic that dealt with scarcity by setting prices. Not quite sure why the member then went on to advocate printing money, which is exactly the opposite.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Supplementary. Does he agree, therefore, that the challenge of achieving prosperity within these global resource limits, or the scarcity that he refers to, that is what's leading to a boom in green industries, such as renewable energy, and that this in turn creates the opportunity to grow a lot of jobs in New Zealand, and we should embrace that?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the fact is New Zealanders do embrace any viable green industry. The Greens carry on as if this is something that they thought of, but actually every day thousands of New Zealanders are acting as environmental managers, making decisions that trade off the prospect of income growth or reduced cost against environmental impacts, and I'd put farmers in that committee, people who drive trucks who worry about their stock effluent, local councils making rules about putting underpasses under roads, businesses who are trying to reduce their energy bill. This is not owned by the Greens or the Pure Advantage Group. It is inherent in the New Zealand character, and the Greens should show more respect for that.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree that this isn't a question about the Greens or Pure Advantage, rather it's a question about government leadership? And does he agree with Pure Advantage when they say that there is an absence of a cohesive long-term green growth policy from his central government?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, no. And a couple of examples I would point to is the fact that New Zealand's proportion of renewable energy is now higher than ever. Because we made the electricity market more competitive and stopped semi-subsidised programs that were going ahead. And the second is the example I used earlier, and that is water reform, probably the single most important environmental reform of the decade. And alongside that, I'd actually put the regulation of the EEZ, which the Labor government had a decade to do, did nothing, and in fact opposed it, and it's been the responsibility of this government to express what every New Zealander would like to see expressed, and that is their sense of stewardship for the oceans. In fact, I would say this government has a much better record on this than either the Greens or Labor ever have.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree with Pure Advantage, who have identified our natural biodiversity as one of the main competitive advantages of our $20 billion jobs-rich tourist industry? And why, therefore, is the government cutting funding to the Department of Conservation, which is the prime protector of that biodiversity?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the funding has not been cut to the Department of Conservation. They're getting pretty much the same revenue as they've had, and they've been treated in exactly the same way as most other public services. But again, I'd point out to the member, while the Department of Conservation has a role in biodiversity protection, a whole lot of other New Zealanders do. And in fact, the Department of Conservation is getting ahead of that member's perception, because they've understood that in order to protect the most biodiversity possible, they need to work with those thousands of New Zealanders who have the same values and want to participate, want to protect biodiversity and have plenty of skills to do so. They, like the Greens, do not have a monopoly and a sort of moralistic superiority about green stuff. Every New Zealander is interested in it, and more of them would like you to show respect for it.
Order.
Supplementary.
Order. If the member Minister could just be a little careful. The Speaker shouldn't be brought into the answer like that.
Supplementary.
Dr. Russel Norman,
thank you, Mr.
question.
Speaker. Does he accept that this isn't an issue about anyone not having respect for what ordinary New Zealanders are doing? The issue is about government leadership, and the problem with the government leadership is that it's been promoting mining extraction, motorways, and those kind of priorities for the government are completely at odds with the green growth agenda.
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the government has, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, has shown a fine sense of balance in its leadership. So yes, we have advocated responsible mining. We are advocating roads of national significance. Alongside that, we're bringing in wide-ranging reform of the way we use water in New Zealand. We're regulating our EEZ and any number of other environmental initiatives, including the home insulation scheme, to which we committed $300 million. Compare that to the record of the Labor Green government that preceded us, and their record is pathetic.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he accept the findings of the Pure Advantage report that shows that New Zealand's environmental performance is declining and that we slipped from 1st to 14th place in the recent Yale Environmental Index? And so why does his government keep promoting policies that are not only leading to record high unemployment but are also degrading the environment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I said before, the government has a very balanced approach on these issues. It is actually the Greens and Labor who promote policies that destroy jobs. We promote policies that create them. But alongside that, we are promoting policies that underpin the sustainability of those jobs. For instance, the water reforms that we are talking about will underpin the sustainability of our whole primary production sector and therefore the sustainability of the jobs in them. And in that sense, the government is taking a balanced approach, and actually many New Zealanders support that.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given his previous commitment to the use of pricing around scarcity, why has the government changed the emissions trading scheme to effectively completely undercut a price on carbon and hence remove that price signal through the economy? And secondly, will he commit to putting a price on the use of water so that we're able to use price signals to drive efficiency in the commercial use of water in irrigation?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the biggest influence on the price for carbon units has been a recession which has led to a significant reduction in the growth rates of carbon emissions. And the Greens should regard that as success, not failure. I know they'd like us to all suffer for environmental advancement, but sometimes it's reasonably easy. And in that case, it is. With respect to price on water, we're interested in that discussion. I think the whole policy establishment has learned a lot from the Greens' advocacy of the emissions trading system. The Land and Water Forum has shown some interest in the issue but not come to conclusions, and I'd expect over the next 6 to 9 months we will have the support of the Green Party in advancing water reform, which may include developments in the pricing area.
Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree with Pure Advantage that there is a huge economic opportunity to invest more in passenger transport, walking and cycling? And if so, why is his government spending 85% of the budget available for new capital projects on a few state highway projects, and less than 5% on making it easier and safer for people to walk, cycle, and take better buses and trains?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I suppose the main reason is because on our planet there's people, and most of those people, in fact over 85% of passenger trips are in cars, and so they need roads. So we're going to make sure the road network is more efficient. The government has actually invested a large amount in cycling, in public transport. We don't. And in fact, as the members pointed out, $750 million into Kiwi Rail for all the reasons that the Greens would advocate. So again, I think our record is coherent and balanced and sensible, and if the members got some good ideas rather than some fluffy ones and mad ones, then we'd be welcome to hear from them.
Julianne Genter.
Doesn't the fact that state highway traffic volumes haven't grown for the better part of the last decade, while passenger transport volumes have been increasing at nearly 10% a year, indicate that New Zealanders do want smart green transport options? And isn't it time to revisit this government's decision to prioritise billions on a few very low-value state highway projects, such as the Kapiti Expressway, the costs of which are 5 times greater than its economic benefits?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I think if you actually look at what's actually happened with investment, the government has continued with the large-scale public and transport investments that the previous government initiated, which is very evident in the Auckland public transport network. But not everyone goes on public transport. If New Zealanders want green transport options, they will get on the trains and the buses. More of them are doing so, and the investment will tend to follow that. But actually, 90% of them don't get on a bus and a train, they get in a car, and we are not willing to ignore those people. We think, as citizens, they have a right to the public investment as well.
Point of order, Dr. Russel Norman.
Mr. Speaker, I seek leave to table the latest Pure Advantage report. A race has begun, and we are in it.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Point of order, Julianne Genter.
I seek leave to table this internal report on the Makai's to Pekapeka Kapiti Expressway, which shows that the benefits of the project are $120 million.
The member said
cost over $500 million.
Order. The member said it's an internal report.
It's an internal report to the New Zealand Transport Agency showing the benefits of the project. Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection?
Well, I gather the Transport Agency wrote it.
It's a report to the Transport Agency by some consultants that were working for the Transport Agency.
By whom?
Becca.
Okay. It's a report by Becca to the Transport Agency. Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Point of order, Julianne Genter.
I seek leave to table the state highway traffic volumes from New Zealand Transport Agency, which show that they haven't grown in over a decade on the route of the Kapiti Expressway.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is objection. Question number 10, Dr. Paul Hutchison.
To the Associate Minister of Health, what is the government doing